Welcome back. This is Roger Steele. Again, this is week number 6 of the World Vision International East Africa Region PMD Pro1 course. And this topic for the video today, part 2, will be an overview of the last module. And the topic is end of project transition. Of course, as we look at the project phase model, the PM phase model, you'll see that end of project transition comes at this particular place in the 6-phase model. Remember that by definition in the PMD Pro1 guide, a project is a temporary endeavor having a definite beginning and end. And so we need to keep in mind that we could have had a very successful project, but if we don't finish well, we could leave a bad impression, and that could be considered failure. So you're only as good as you finish. I also want to emphasize the point that transition, even though it comes at the very end of the phase model, it integrates in many, many other places. And I've just listed on this slide several tools where transition can be integrated, or how the tools can actually help out in transition. So let's just start out with decision gates. And you'll remember decision gates are those points where decisions are made, go, no go, decisions about whether the project should continue or whether it should be adjusted. So they can provide regular review of justification, allowing the project to remain relevant to stakeholders and effective in meeting their needs. So especially whether or not it's contributing toward the higher levels of change, impacts, outcomes and goals. The risk register then is related to transition because management of risk, including probability and impact, as we discussed in an earlier chapter, allowed the intended scope to be delivered on time and on budget. The RACI, because stakeholders' roles were clearly identified and managed, there was a high level of satisfaction within the project. Work breakdown structure. The project defined activities, both comprehensive and detailed, direct and indirect. That was accomplished. And the issues log, problems and complaints were identified quickly and completely and managed to the satisfaction of stakeholders. So every tool, every process that we've undertaken to this point is designed to help us to come to this successful endpoint. Now remember, as you are getting ready for the examination, that there are four scenarios for transition that are listed in the PMD Pro1 guide. I won't go over these. I just wanted to mention that they are important that you know those. Now, a tool that might be used in the transition phase is called the Transition Planning Matrix. And we've got, I think there's actually 3 slides here that go over this matrix. So some of the components that you'll be looking for is that you plan transition from the earliest phases. So transition really should be part of identification and design and on through the project. Asking the questions, what type of transition is envisioned, and the guiding principles should be transparency, especially funding, and balancing firm commitments with flexibility. Second important aspect that goes on the matrix for transition planning is developing local linkages, including the right partnerships, clearing common goals, and then supporting those local partnerships. Third one, of course, building capacity. Is what capacities are needed and what exist, building on existing capacities, and then designing monitoring to track capacity building. So capacity building may be a direct output, but it could also be an indirect one that is assisting in everything else that you're trying to do. Extremely important for successful sustainability. Mobilizing local resources, what inputs are needed to maintain services, procure resources locally wherever possible. There's often a challenge of the difficulty in finding adequate local resources. Next is to stagger the phase out, asking the question, what are the project's key elements? Guiding principles are flexibility in questions. Challenges might be insufficient time to seek impact. That's always a huge challenge. And then finally, allowing roles to evolve after transition, asking the key question, types of ongoing support, advice, mentoring, technical, guiding principles, preventing slippage of intended results, and then the challenges, availability of funding for ongoing support. Pay attention as you're studying for the exam, thinking about the different activities that are involved in project closeout or transition. And remember that the PMD Pro groups a set of activities into administrative, financial, and contracts. Just have a good look at those before you complete your studying process. And finally, remember that learning could actually be a principle, and we have discussed that maybe in future editions of PMD Pro we'll add learning, but it's extremely important that you have learning that takes place throughout not just the projects, but the programs, the portfolios, and the whole organizational structure. So there needs to be learning before, learning during, and learning after. And that learning needs to be something that is responded to. And one of the things that you might do is to take some of the tools and modify them to add lessons learned. And I've just shown you an example here of how you could take an issues log and you could add another column called lessons learned. That could be in a very effective way of incorporating lessons learned, and then at the end of the project, of course, you'll be able to review those through what's called an after-action review. An after-action review is a simple, quick, and versatile learning activity, relatively straightforward, and it helps participants to understand what was planned versus what actually happened. So it's not a full-fledged evaluation. It's focused on learning. And then finally, remember that you need to honor the social relationships, officially recognize the project closer, and celebrate success at all levels. Honor those people and those relationships. That's all. This was a short module. If you have any questions, as always, and especially as you're preparing for the examination, don't hesitate to contact me.